we'll have a lot of great stuff to work with. Excellent. Well, we are live. Thanks for jumping back into this conversation, Hunt. This is session 2. If you're just joining us, there's a whole another one, but this is session 2 on music technology. And basically in this session, I think one of the things that we'd like to cover is kind of setting the stage for the current reality in depth for what it means to be a successful artist in today's current climate. Like, we've described kind of what we're up against, and we'd really like to kind of walk through all of the different kind of reality pieces for our audience, which we're speaking specifically to people in the music industry in some capacity. We'll kind of leave it open-ended at that. But you're working in the music industry, you're working for a band, you're a manager, etc., and you understand the game to some extent. And we're going to kind of fill in some of the gaps and potentially just help you learn how to market your band better, but also it'll lead us into the conversation and set the stage for like, what is it that we're really talking about here? We've talked about a lot of ideas, and then it's like, well, what does that really mean concrete? And so through this process, I hope that you'll understand more of the concrete things that we're actually talking about and how this is really just a continuation of everything that we've been doing with technology through, the internet.
Yeah, exciting stuff.
Intro?
Yeah, ever evolving reality of music, because what is going on today is likely going to be very different from what's going on 1 and 5 years from now. But, we're doing our best to stay on top of it and lean into these technologies and try them all out. And we both feel pretty strongly that there is going to be some pretty groundbreaking changes for arts and music and culture through these technologies. So we're excited to dive deeper. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's really great. And so just as a little bit of a reference and kind of a background check on who we are, just so that you know what we're bringing to the conversation. Hunt's got a deep 20-year background in the music industry, and I'm bringing the marketing, content, creative, and technology. And obviously Hunt's also been involved very deeply in the technology side as well. For the last 8 years as well, we've been doing this type of thing together. So it's bringing all of that kind of to bear specifically for artists and helping them to understand what's happening so that they can better be in a position to be successful as an artist and be able to sustain their living, make a living, create great art, and do the things that the fans want. And
yes. Something that I think is very interesting from you is how you kind of make the comparisons to what you saw early on in social media kind of arising, and how you kind of see some of the same trends happening right now. And I'd love to see if you wanted to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. What's old is new, and we kind of repeat the cycle. And so I think that we're far enough down the road here with technology and its influence in the internet and how that's connected us and how it's influenced all these different things, specifically the music industry. And we're far enough down here to have learned a few lessons and have a few things we can kind of pick up and point at and look at where we're going now as kind of a map to where we're going now, because we've already kind of seen some of these things happen. I think as we've been talking to artists, one of the questions that's just sort of been posed over and over again that I think is one to kind of frame up this question would be, what is a record label today? And that journey has, record label has done different things for artists in the whole equation of the music industry, has played a significant role in shaping that. But today, largely it doesn't seem like bands need a record label to be successful, and in fact they typically don't get signed until they're successful. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think the real thing is the record industry kind of died when people stopped buying CDs and records. There was no more income from that, and so when the streaming came along and music was free, whether it was Napster or Spotify or YouTube, a lot less people went to their local record shop and supported a band that way. Sometimes on tour people were buying albums. But when that revenue stream dried up, so did kind of these record labels in the traditional sense. And so you had these music executives who weren't ready to get out of the business, and they were trying to think, how can they adapt to this new landscape? And they still want to be an intermediary between you and your fans, and that is something that we're feel pretty strongly that needs to be uprooted, will be uprooted, and is in the end in the best interest of the art to connect the fan directly to the musician or the artist.
I think kind of the point here is that the role that they've played already they're taking all this value from the equation, but they're largely not contributing to the success of the artist in the way that typically in the past they could point to as a justification for the fees that they took for their services, right?
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good comparison for people who are in tech or investing, as record labels are like VCs, and nobody really likes VCs a ton. I'm sure there's some great ones out there, but in the same time, they are casting a wide net and placing a lot of bets on different projects and artists, and 95% of them fail, but the ones that don't fail make their whole investment worthwhile. And the ones that do fail, they kind of just push them into the trash and don't really care anymore. If you didn't make me money on this first album, it's like you're kind of dead to me. And that just because that album didn't go viral or blow up doesn't mean that the next album is not one of the generational changing albums that gets everybody, going. So it's they look at it as a very X's and O's, black and white business sense, and they're not art first people. They are business first people.
I think there's a healthy balance there to the business side and the art side kind of the equation to be successful. But I think the big point here is that largely it's up to the bands themselves to utilize platforms like Instagram, all of these consumer places where typically creators or influencers more generally are able to get audience, right? They're able to get distribution and attention and then monetize that in some way. And so bands that are successful today are playing a very specific game in order to expand their audience base, in order to, sell tickets, in order to grow, in order to be successful and be self-sustaining and making money, and creating the art that they want to. So that is kind of the model today for how it's happening. So bands are typically a slave to these different platforms, publishing certain frequencies. They have to publish every day to keep the engagement algorithm going for them. There's a bunch of components to the way that the social media landscape is, and the attention landscape curated there is developing or continuing to unfold. The longer we go on with this particular formula, the more they tune those algorithms to be extractive, meaning that your reach to your audience dwindles. Even though people are following you, the algorithm doesn't serve your content to them as frequently. And so artists get on this treadmill of social media and they are successful in gaining new audience. This is how you do it. But in order to play on this platform, you increasingly are having to spend more money in order to get the distribution that you used to get organically, because someone said, I want to follow you on Instagram.
That's a great point, the organically, because there's a lot of artists, if Facebook had started out with their model as they are right now and their algorithm, I don't think a lot of artists would have gotten hooked into this cycle of this is how you reach your audience, this is how you promote to your fans. No. But when they first started allowing bands to promote, it was great. They weren't charging you any money. You were reaching a ton of people. You were getting new followers, new likes. You were selling more tickets at concerts. And it was like, wow, this social media thing's really awesome. And like,
it did work.
It did work.
And does work to lesser extent, but it still does work.
Yes. But now it's a daily game of you have to be on top of it with certain clips can't be longer than this amount, or you have to tag the right thing, or you can only put the link in the comments, or it's not going to go right. And it's an ever evolving thing that like bands and artists need to like stay on top of, which is really hard. And you and I both know there's a bunch of unbelievable musicians out there and artists in general who never really get the fame that they deserve. And some of it is these artists don't possess this business side of things. They're really great at making the music, making the great art, but then when it comes time to promoting themselves and dealing with these algorithms, they don't know the next thing about it. And so their art goes unheard and unnoticed because they're not really able or willing to play the game that exists right now.
Yeah, I think largely it's a lot. And so then basically if you're looking at your audience spread across multiple different channels, so for example, Instagram, Facebook, all these different outposts that you have to maintain as a brand, as a presence, because you have different fans on these different platforms. It becomes a lot. And definitely when you're at a certain level, you have to hire, a social media manager in order to manage all of that side of the business. In order to be successful, that's what it takes.
Yeah.
To your point of how it was great in the beginning and now it's not so great with the algorithms, the very thing that I think is people need to understand is that because these companies like Facebook and whatnot are funded so heavily by investors, they can afford at the beginning, they're in the beginning stages, their goal is to attract all of the people to their platform. So of course it's going to be free. Of course it's going to be great. And they're not going to extract very much out of that because they have to get the whole thing going. But inevitably, because of the way that these companies are funded, the investors want their return on their investment and they want a huge return. And so they turn that dial up and start monetizing through ads and different things that we've seen now. I can guarantee you that any one of our listeners who's on any kind of social media platform has the firsthand user experience of knowing that every time you hit a click, you're watching a video ad. There's all of this is so inundating us now on these platforms that it's pretty evident from a consumer standpoint how you can see what's really going on. So if this is your business, the cost of doing business on these platforms increases in your time and energy, but also they're keeping, the vast sum of the value from the content that you're creating inside of their own platform and taking it for themselves and delivering very little value back to the artists in return, who are the ones creating all of the things that people are finding useful and engaging on these very platforms.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make. And I think there's some age differences in that where I think people, who are coming up and in their 20s right now, they know that if something's free, you are the product. But then you talk to my mom, she has no idea that Facebook is even advertising to her or how they're monetizing. She just is like the perfect target for that. Subconsciously, they're just getting her and she doesn't realize it. Where, somebody who's 22, fresh out of college, they've got their guard up. They know that hey, this is probably an ad that's showing me on my YouTube before my favorite artist's song, and so forth. So, yeah.
And I think what's interesting here is that for the artists and for the people in the music industry, the thing to think about here is that as you start to participate in these platforms, essentially you're cannibalizing your audience who's coming for your art. You're serving them up to these platforms and allowing them to be advertised to, because strictly the reason we're doing it for its distribution, but also because they're hosting that content for free. They're paying the video hosting costs. They're paying the servers. They're paying all of the infrastructure costs. They're paying all the things that it costs to actually deliver this kind of experience. And that, from the artist's perspective, is something to come to terms with, because you're pushing all of that down on your audience. If you're into connecting and sharing a message, as an example, like with your music, somebody's in flow with that message, and then boom, they're watching, an ad about, fertilizer for their lawn care.
Yep. And it's hard because a lot of artists that I've talked to, they know it's not right, but they say, what else do you do? That's where my audience lives. And, when the technology was evolving and Spotify first came around, I worked with a couple artists who were like, screw that. They pay you pennies for every $100 that they make on your music. That's screwed up. And they fought it, and they didn't put their music on Spotify for years. And in the end, it just hurt them, because people would say, hey, I want to listen to this band. Where do I check out the music? I'm looking on Spotify. I can't find them. And they're like, well, that's where I find my new music. And so them kind of pushing back against the man, they didn't really have a better option. And, they might have been able to go out on their own and build something, but the tools didn't really exist for that not to be a really intense project to make on your own. And, that's something that I guess we feel really strongly about now, is the tools are really beginning to exist where you can be sovereign over your relationship between your fans and you and your art.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The difficulty of doing this stuff is coming down and becoming more approachable to more people. And that's a huge thing that is a part of this whole equation. Excuse me. I think that as we start to talk about this, we can frame all of this up by understanding what currently works in this flow at a high level, and then basically about how you can recapture, as as an artist, you can recapture some of this value that you're creating inside of your community. So basically, I think where it's helpful to start is to understand that as you're playing the social media game, the real strategy that's proven effective time and time again across all of the verticals that you can examine is that basically you have to participate in these other platforms in order to get the distribution and the reach for the audience. The eyeballs are there, the people are there. That's where you have to go. In a traditional social media marketing context, the goal is to get those people with high quality content to give away all this value for free. And then basically you attract those people back to your owned platform in your website as the primary function that you own, control, and the entire experience on your website is controlled by you versus other portions of the World Wide Web. The internet guarantees this through domain names, through servers that you control and pay for. Like, you have sovereignty over this corner of the internet by the very principles of how it's constructed. In this formula, the game is get them back to your website that you own, the relationship, and then you want to get an email address from them so that you can have a direct communication link to that fan. And in this example, publish a newsletter with upcoming tour dates to your fan club, right? Who said they want to know, and you can tell them directly without an intermediary, without a Facebook, without any of these things in the middle. You can directly communicate with your audience, your fan. So this is the formula that works. This is 101 kind of content marketing. So not disputed, widely known, basic principle that almost every company is utilizing. Okay. In this formula, so bands are successful now doing this very thing. They're posting clips. They have Linktree, right, on their Instagram to get around that so that you can connect back to direct posts. All of these types of things exist. Basically, what bands need to do, if they're not doing these things, they need to get this whole thing kind of set up for the traditional sort of best practices for how to grow and be successful and be sovereign over your destiny as an artist. This is kind of 101.
Yep.
Right. Would you agree? Like, from your perspective, working with so many different bands, like is this accurate for what I'm saying is an assumption across every industry? You find that same thing to be true in the music industry, right?
It's pretty accurate. I mean, I believe it's ever evolving because since I've been in the music industry, whenever I send out an offer to an agent or a band to play a concert, there is an expense line for how are we going to reach these fans? How are we going to promote them? Well, I'm dating myself a little bit, but when I first started out, it was radio. There was a budget for radio ads, and that's how you were going to reach your audiences, by putting an advertisement on the radio. And then it turned into sponsored posts on Facebook. You had to pay Facebook to do what they originally did for free, and kind of what they promised their app would do for you is reaching your audience. You had to put money, so there's an expense line for sponsored posts, and now it's turning into like influencer marketing and different ways of marketing like that. And so there's been an ever evolving way about how you reach your audience, but in the end, like, all of these ways involved an intermediary. It's somebody who you had to pay good money to reach your audience, who in the end really wants to hear from you. They want to know where you're playing your shows. They want to know when your new album comes out. And so they've signed up and liked your social media to do that. And now these intermediaries are like, great, you want to reach them? Pay. Like, a lot of bands that I work with spend well into the six figures on sponsoring social media posts a year. And that's pretty wild to think about. I mean, if you look at what a percentage of what they gross a year, it's a 5 or 10% of what the band grosses is going right into Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg's pocket.
Yeah. And those advertising expenses, this is publicity isn't free. And regardless, this is just a different channel that's necessary part of the equation for distribution for any band. The key here is that the basic fundamentals of your website, I think, are where we can start to unpack some of these components of owning your corner of the internet and having control and sovereignty over that domain, instead of being a victim of whatever changes or things that other these platforms want to do, you're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to continue to play those games. It's just a part of the modern reality that we live in. But the point is that you're ever increasingly investing more and more and more in the actual assets that you're creating as an artist, which are that's the real product that you have that has value. And so if we look at being self-sustaining as the goal here, how do we empower artists, to take control over the business of their art in order to sustain it? This is a fundamental first step, I feel like, is that web presence because of the control piece.
Something that's really interesting in the way that I look at bands. When the bands are submitting, they want to play the Dillon Amphitheater, they want to play one of my festivals. The first thing I look at before even how great is this music, before I even listen, is how good are you at promoting yourself? If you look and they have a social media following with, 217 likes, and they have a YouTube video with 42 plays, that's not that impressive. If I look on their social media and they have 112,000 likes and they have, 1 million views on their social media, I instantly know that this band knows how to promote themselves. And so I want to work with them because I'm in the business of getting people to my concerts and buying tickets. And so I know that this band knows how to reach their audience. So it's a very attractive thing when I see a band who understands how to promote and how to reach their audience. I'd be lying if I said that there hasn't been times when I've booked a band that maybe wasn't as strong musically, but was a much better at promoting themselves and reaching their audience than a band that was unbelievable musically, but they just really didn't get that side of the business.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it is a business. As much as it is an art, we're talking about the music business here. And, it is both of those things at the same time, but it's fundamental to understand that this is a critical component of it, is how you tell your story and how you market yourself so that you're successful in this current modern time. So from that context of your website, basically, you can look and start to break apart some of these different pieces that you have on different platforms. So a key one really quickly that's easy to understand is the YouTube one. So video is without a doubt the number one way that we have currently as human beings to connect in a way that's very similar or a proxy and close as you can get to real life. So video is incredibly, you can look at statistics if you're curious about it, but trends like Twitter, for example, featuring video that's native inside of Twitter, the algorithm basically will serve native video content to its users in Twitter, in the app. Roughly, my guess is the estimation's roughly 10 times more than if you post that video on YouTube and have people, link off to it.
And why do they
leave the platform? Because they want the audience to stay on the platform and engage. That's the metric that they're trying to
so if I clicked out and I'm on YouTube and then I got distracted with another YouTube video, I'm off Twitter and I'm not being able to be monetized by their advertisement or whatever. So they are incentivized to keep me on their platform as long as possible.
Correct, as a viewer. And basically the point here is that video has become prevalent in all of these platforms. It's not just relegated to YouTube as a video platform. It's a core function of everything like Instagram, which was originally photographs, right? So video has become the backbone of all of how we communicate and connect. It's just become the way we experience modern life on the internet. So with your website and with the content that you're creating for all these platforms, your website becomes your library of all of the video, all the content assets that you create, and the experience that you provide for your audience on your own website should be premier. Because you're creating all of this great stuff. And basically this is the place where they come and they experience it ad-free. They experience exactly what you as an artist want to communicate through art, through music, through imagery, video, all these different mediums that come together on your website.
Yeah, it's very valuable to get them there because just like Twitter, once you're spending time on there, and you watch one video, the odds are you're going to kind of poke around the website and do more. It's a challenge that we face though of how do you get them to click through when you're already on Facebook or you're already on Twitter and you're scrolling through, it's very easy to watch a video, but like, can you get somebody to consciously leave that gated area and go to your website directly? There's a lot of upside once you figure out how to do that.
Correct. And that click-through rate is something that's really the strategy with which an artist would deliver certain types of content on, take Instagram, for example, and then draw an artist back to their website for something fuller, more rich. They give you, that's the tactic. So it's an ongoing process in your own personal brand strategy to be able to identify with your audience and then be able to deliver nuggets of something that give them the dopamine hit on Instagram and is part of the relationship, right? When they're scrolling, you're in their feed. You know, you're playing that game. Like I said, you have to play that game.
You're leaving almost a trail of breadcrumbs. But
exactly.
The breadcrumbs lead to your website, which you have a much more favorable relationship with the community.
And the point here is you continue to do this and draw them back to you over time. It builds your audience on your own platform, but the experience on your own website has to be premier. You have to give them things that they can't get anywhere else. And that exclusivity of different things that are a part of the experience in a digital context, those are the things that keep making it worthwhile to come back to your website. Where, again, the point here is that you have an ever-growing, ever-deepening relationship directly with your audience and your fans. And the point here is that you're adding value. More of the things that you do, the reason that your fans like you already to begin with, if you focus on that value that you give them, what is it that they're getting out of it? And then create more of those experiences in a digital context using digital tools, it will result in them doing the traditional things that produce growth. Word of mouth marketing. They tell their friends about your music. They share it on these other platforms. They're more active in forums. When your tour comes up, they're the first one, they're signed up on your email list and they're the first ones to book, to buy tickets to your upcoming tour. And you grow your fan base in all those traditional senses of the ways that you're able to sustain your business of music through utilizing these tools more effectively.
Yeah. And once you get people to your website, you can be much more creative, where everything in Instagram or Twitter is kind of all uniform and all the same for these reasons that we talked about. Twitter makes you be uniform because they want to keep people on the platform. So all the videos are similar lengths. They kind of look similar, but like you can really do more interactive things once you really get people, because there's not those limits, and you're not kind of living and dying by the algorithm and being at the mercy of, the updates that it just had and how to reach people.
Mm-hmm. So given all of this kind of framework, and we're talking about, again, to just kind of hold out, to keep referring to kind of the vision behind doing this series is really about empowering artists to be able to take control of that relationship with their fans and be able to create a sustainable business doing the art that they love, right? And so
I think the business part is really important, because you get the relationship right, then the business comes secondary. The business will follow, but you got to have that relationship between you and your audience. It's not about monetizing first. It's about establishing the relationship with the fans first, and then there's a bunch of non-predatory ways to monetize it where people will want to support you that I think make a big difference.
Yeah. So kind of first step would be to host, if we're going to talk, let's talk about video just as a clear launching point to expanding kind of the experience that you're providing. So in the current context, musicians, a summary would be that musicians have the bulk of their revenue comes from their efforts in touring. They typically, by and large, one of the big problems with streaming is that they make fractions of a fraction of a penny per play. It never amounts up to anything. Even if you're a hugely successful artist, they even publish some of the checks that they get, which are ridiculous. So it's well known that that's not a source of income, right? And so basically the touring aspect is the way that bands are able to put blood, sweat, and tears into the machine, turn the crank, and they're able to monetize their art in a very specific way by performance, right? Is that a good summary?
Yeah, correct. Currently, but we all both see that landscape changing a little bit.
Yeah. And so basically there's only, in my opinion, there's only so many shows that an artist or a band can do. There's only so much physically that anything can happen, that can happen within this current, there's just physical limitations to this. So step one for one of the process pieces is that given the nature of our interconnectivity and our lives are lived largely on these digital platforms and through technology, the clear first step is, I think, and we've seen a lot of examples of traditional bands that are traditionally marketing their events, their concerts, and expanding their audience through using live streams.
Yeah,
And
I
essentially,
think that COVID really helped that become a trend. You know, you watched people from like having to be there to be like, you know what, like maybe I can hang out in my living room and have a dance party with the 4 people that are there and like have, you know, a different experience, but also a very cool and unique experience.
yeah, it's a really wide open field for engaging your fans through this medium. And of course, it's not the same as being in real life. We all know that's obvious. But I think that once you get past that sort of barrier, it opens up, and you start thinking creatively, it opens up a lot of interesting things, a lot of interesting experiences for your fans that physically can't come, which for a variety of different reasons. And the other factor to expanding not only that experience, but also from the revenue perspective, live streaming has a tremendous ability. There's plenty of bands now that are selling live stream tickets for $20 a pop, as an example. And so there's a whole nother revenue stream for distributing your efforts that are already, it's an investment that you've made to put on this show, right? Tour buses, talent, et cetera, like all the way down. And essentially for very minimal cost and some forethought, you're able to expand your offering and open up another revenue stream.
Yeah, to a much bigger reach. You play a concert in Denver, you are promoting and hoping that some of the 600,000 people that live in Denver show up. You play a concert on a live stream, you're opening up to one of your fans that lives in Thailand or one of your fans that lives in Argentina, and they're able to connect with your music in a way that they typically aren't able to come and enjoy your shows. And it's very important to say that we don't think it's ever going to fully replace the live show. It's just a strong addition to this. And I think that you're going to see communities be more based on online. And I've told, Jonathan, these stories offline, that I think that I've met a lot of my friends through online communities that started out as a digital relationship. We were talking about a concert or a clip or commenting on a message board.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got into DMs and started talking more. And then we decided to meet up and hang out. And now these are like real-time best friends of mine who, we hang out all the time in the real world. But like, would that exist if it wasn't for this online community? And I think that is only going to become stronger and a more common instance.
Well, it does exist in real life, but the whole point is that these particular relationships in the story narrative, that personal experience you have, would not exist had it not been for these, message boards and chat rooms related to the artist that the common bond that you shared around a specific artist and their music. And I think this is the empowering part of all of this, is that you're expanding all of the things that are great about your fans and you're enabling them to do more of it. So in the vein of what we're talking about here, first and foremost, like to get back, into the main meat of it, utilizing video technology, whether it's playback, music videos, different things like that on your site to create these experiences. Instead of using the easy solution, the cheap, free solution, like we've discussed, using YouTube, Twitch, whatever it is, and farming off your audience to some other platform where they're getting advertised to and getting, that whole experience. One of the central things that I think is a part of this, specifically related to music and this application, is doing video on your own site and putting, there's different reasons why you can do different strategic things, whether or not that video stream of your concert is free. If that's your ethos, you can make it free. If they want to monetize that stream and create more revenue, you can put that behind a gate so that you can sell live stream tickets to it. And basically, it opens up a lot of channels for the artist, and a lot of your control gives it back to you as the artist to be able to say how this experience, how you're extending your shows and the thing that you do into the digital space so that more people can experience that. And again, it's entirely up to you as the artist as to how you deploy some of these basic principles.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on just giving fans new ways to interact. And once you inspire your audience to kind of think outside the box, it creates a deeper relationship with them. And once you create that deeper relationship, they become your biggest supporter. When they're playing,
Right.
when you're playing in town, they're telling all their friends to come. They're posting about it. If they feel invested in your music, whether it's financially or just that they've spent a lot of hours and time in the community, they are much more likely to try to make the community grow, which is in your best interest as well. And at the same time, instead of it being like a extractive relationship, it's like these audiences are now on your team. They are
The value add to the experience.
Yes, exactly. And, there are certain bands that the most powerful thing they have is their community, and it's more powerful than the music. It's like, I like the band. I love the community. I love my
Right.
friends who I go with. I have a great time at the shows, but mostly it's because of the different people that are there and the different experiences and the cool venues they play, and not as much about the musical notes that I'm hearing as much as like the full overall experience.
Right. Yeah, and it's not to diminish the music is the reason that brings all these people together. But again, we're humans, and it's about connecting with other humans. And the shared experience of a concert isn't about listening to the music in your car in the parking lot where it sounds better, maybe, right? Theoretically, it's about experiencing the music live with other human beings and sharing that moment together. Because again, we're humans and we really connect in this particular way. And so if you're looking to grow your using, again, modern music sort of strategy and tactics and technology, this is one of the fundamental ways that I see growth for music in general.
Let's talk about where we think streaming could go. And, I've been having a lot of ideas after watching streams of the Phish concert at the Sphere. And, I imagine a day in a not too distant future where you're putting on your Oculus or your VR goggles and you are able to be in the Sphere and you're able to look at different graphics at different times. And you know what? Right now you're in the upper deck and you're getting a full panoramic view. But maybe you want to go on the floor. You want to go front row right on the rail and you want to press a button and you want to switch to that view. That's amazing. Maybe you want to get a view that's never been available to the audience before. Maybe you want to be on the drum kit and see what Jon Fishman is looking at while he's playing of the huge audience. And that's something that didn't exist. If you go to the concert, you're never going to get a view from what is going out of the lead singer's eyes. But in this new reality of streaming, you might get this perspective that's absolutely unbelievable and different that, come on, everybody wants to know what it feels like to be a rock star and stand on stage in front of 100,000 people. Maybe you can get a little taste of that with this new streaming and VR and interacting with the people that are, at the virtual show with you.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of really engaging, compelling ways that people are going to deploy all of this to create new experiences. And the limits are really only their creativity and how they deploy it for their fans, and that's one of the exciting things that can be built on once you have some of these fundamental pieces in place. Like foundational is your website and how you host your community in your owned place.
That's a great point that you said foundational, because a lot of the stuff we're talking about is laying the base layer for your future community. Like we're kind of starting small with your website and streaming, but once you kind of lay the base layer down, the options are limitless for what you can do, but you've got to you got to walk before you could run. You can't just, all of a sudden go to this really high tech wild thing if you haven't started, with letting your community know what it's like to have a wallet, what it's like to actually own a piece of the stream, what it's like to be in a gate kept area. So yeah, it's really important to talk about that. We are talking about the very basic foundation that will allow you to achieve some really, really wild things on top of it eventually.
Yeah, and we'll lay out kind of all the pieces of the puzzle. I think what we'll do here today is kind of go through a top to bottom kind of list of these pieces, but each one of them know that we're going to tie this all back in again to this Web3 technology that we've been talking about. And there's just a level setting here first, and then I think we could get into some of the ways that this really is implemented.
I got a question for you. If I'm just going to ask you, what is a Web3 technology? What is the criteria for something being a Web3 technology? To me, it means that something that is self-sovereign. It's decentralized. You're hosted without needing an intermediary. But what does it mean to you?
Right. I would say that the fundamental difference, if you're looking at these different generational stages of the underlying technology, that when I say something like Web3 technology, it means that you're not creating a centralized application that you control and no one can leave. So, for example, and the other kind of underlying piece of this is that that underneath the hood, the code base that powers all of these things are open source as a fundamental basic principle. It actually would not function. These things wouldn't function in the blockchain space if they were not open source. So there's a bunch of pieces that are deep dives into why it's Web3 that are probably beyond people's like interest level. But fundamentally, what makes it Web3 means that I, as the one who's deploying it, have control over it. It would be that ownership piece would be the fundamental distinction. So I'm not using Facebook, and Facebook doesn't have control over my videos. My videos are on my own website, and they're playing back off of a system that I control and pay for, that is not serving ads to my audience because I'm the control of it. Right?
Yeah, I like that. And can you also go into what is open source? Because I got to admit to something. When I was, in music, but kind of transitioning into Web3 and meeting all these great new friends, I didn't know what open source truly meant. I thought I had an idea, and Kevin Owocki told me at ETH Denver, hey, we're doing this interview and it's going to be on camera, and just tell them what open source means to you. And if I'm being dead honest, they asked me the question and I answered it without even knowing what open source is. What?
We blew over our time for the ENS call. It was at 1.
I didn't know we had an ENS call.
I did. Yeah.
Okay. So should we, did they ping you?
Yes.
Should we just jump on there?
Yes.
Okay, bye.